Welcome back, everybody. I have the distinction of speaking with somebody who is trying to create a movement that all of us need, and I want to talk to her all about it. Please welcome to the program, Grace Makholm.
Thanks. It's really good to be here.
It's my pleasure. And looking, excuse me, losing my voice, and looking at the organization that you have, Be an Arts Hero, is really heartwarming because we always have these conversations of what is the role of the arts within our society, and does the society have a need to contribute to it and to continue growing it? And to me, it's such a silly question because the answer is resounding, of course. But some people seem not to think that way, and some people find all sorts of excuses not to dedicate a certain portion of our budget to the arts, which again, it's one of those things that really don't make sense to me about our wonderful country. So I am so happy that you and your organization are doing something about it. Please tell us more about Be an Arts Hero.
Sure. Be an Arts Hero is an intersectional grassroots campaign. We like to call it a kitchen table movement, which started with myself, Brooke Ishibashi, Carson Elrod, and Matthew Lee Erlbach in our respective kitchens and living rooms. When we realized that the arts and culture sector, no one was really coming to save us. At least that's what we thought initially. It's one of the lessons I think any upstart begins, which is like, this is something that nobody's ever done before. And as we've gained momentum and we've made really amazing allies, we've realized there's such important work that often goes unsung or unacknowledged within our community that people have been doing for decades. So, we've sort of changed the narrative or changed the story of how we have come to be instead of a story of nobody's coming to save us. We've realized there are a lot of folks in the good fight, and we've had the honor of joining them in that fight. We just happen to be the new kids on the block.
And what are some of the alliances you've mentioned that you've made wonderful alliances? What are some of the things that you've seen that hopefully you have been able to accomplish already?
Oh, I mean, we've met with I want to say the exact number. Correct me if I'm, I might be wrong at this point. We've met with over 50 Senate offices, dozens of House offices. We've drafted our own bill language. We initiated 2 days of actions that were national campaigns, that were national days of actions, and we have been fighting tirelessly for federal relief for the arts and culture sector. It is my job all day, every day. I wake up and this is all I do until I fall asleep.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate so much taking your time away from that to spend with us, and hopefully we can be yet another avenue of people joining the good fight for you.
One of the things that Carson likes to say is that you have to have the conversation to change the conversation. Yeah. So it's my pleasure to talk on this show. This is part of the work, right? What we've realized about the work that we're doing is that we're not just fighting for federal relief. That's how we began, right? But we're realizing that our task is also to rebuild after this crisis is over, and then to reposition the arts and culture sector as a legislative priority moving forward in our government. So that means a secretary of arts and culture, for example. So within that, we realized that data is on our side. We are a sector that contributes $877 billion to the United States GDP. I mean, that's an astronomical amount. We're 4.5% of the GDP, and we employ 5.1 million Americans. So it's not, the data is actually on our side. So what we realized is what we are really up against is bias. what we have to do is change the story of how people see our sector. It is an economic sector filled with over 650,000 small businesses. And we are an economic driver. We are a jobs creator. And what we are doing is basically changing the narrative of how people view our sector, and how they view arts workers. So these conversations on shows like yours are not a distraction from the work. They actually are the work. Again, you have to have the conversation to change the conversation.
Yeah. So what are the biases that you have been encountering in your conversation so far?
I think, well, there are multitudes of them. When we talk about arts workers, one of the terms that we use instead of artist is arts worker, because the arts and culture sector employs more than just the people you see on stage or behind the camera, right? And those people are impacted by this crisis just as much, if not more so, than the actors, performers, singers, dancers that you would see on stage or on camera, right? There's arts administrators, there's ushers, there's concession folks, there's roadies, there's stage, did I say stage managers already? There's directors, choreographers, technicians, there's, the list goes on and on and on and on and on, 5.1 million workers on. So, this show would be very long if I went down the list. But one of the ways with which we're changing the narrative is by reminding folks that arts work is work, and that there are more folks employed by the arts and culture sector than just artists, right? So one of the narratives that we hear a lot is kind of confusing, actually, when you really take it apart, when you really deconstruct it. This idea that that the arts and culture sector is filled with nothing but starving artists, which is this idea that we are sort of a drain on society or a blight on society, and that we don't have a practical job that employs people or contributes monetarily to society, which, $877 billion, again, just reminding you. But then the other side of it is that we're either starving artists or we're coastal elites sitting in our Malibu beach houses. It's sort of like, which one is it? And the answer is neither. The vast majority of arts and culture workers are solidly middle class, and very often a member of at least one union. So we're talking about the backbone of what we think of when we think of labor in this country, being perfectly encapsulated in the arts and culture sector. So that's one of the biases. I think another one is simply the idea that arts and culture primarily exists in, say, New York, LA, and a little bit of Chicago, right? And the truth of the matter is that arts and culture employs folks in the tens of thousands in every single state of our union, including DC and Puerto Rico. And there's not a single state in our union where the arts and culture doesn't contribute billions of dollars to their state's GSP. So part of how we're changing the narrative and part of the bias that we're fighting against is this idea that we're small potatoes, that we are not an economically robust sector of this economy, of our nation's economy, and that our work isn't valuable or isn't worthwhile.
Yeah, I think, again, as I'm not really an outsider because I'm a part of the industry, but as somebody who is listening to this, the first thing that comes to mind is, now that you mentioned how much money the industry is contributing to it, it would be great to show, in terms of number of workers, we employ as many as this industry, or we contribute as much as this industry. I think that would really kind of highlight to people, it's not just numbers, it's, oh my God, how we compare to manufacturing or agriculture or finance industry in the United States. These things would again highlight for people who are unfamiliar just how big and important it is. And the other question is, people think that the government is really funding the arts. which again I find ironic. But how much money is in the budget that is actually contributed to the arts versus how much money the industry generates on its own?
Sure. Well, first of all, there are some wonderful resources that anyone can check out if you have access to the internet. One is all right, so I'm going to give you the acronym, and then I always flip what the words are in my brain.
Mhm.
It's what we call the other NASA, NASAA, and that's the National Association of States Arts Agencies, I believe is the correct order of those words. And it has this wonderful dynamic map that we use all the time. We're also in contact with them. They're wonderful folks. And it basically, all of that information is there. We do contribute more than transportation, more than agriculture. It is one, we are a huge economic driver. And beyond more than transportation, or yes, more 200 and I want to say $260 billion more than transportation. I'm fudging on the numbers a little bit, but it's over 200 billion is what we'll say. So when we talk about these other sectors, nobody has any problem understanding why there are government subsidies for agriculture, or government subsidies for transportation, or government subsidies for construction, which we're also larger than. So we don't, the closest we have is the National Endowments for the Arts, which has been systematically defunded over the course of a few decades. It was sort of the casualty of the 80s culture wars, where there were a few lawmakers who decided that all arts and culture in this country needed to suffer and be defunded because they didn't like a couple of arts works that were funded by the NEA. That's politics. And, we are, for the record, Being Arts Hero is completely nonpartisan. We believe that arts and culture is, arts and culture is universal. If anything is universal, it's song, it's dance, it's expression. I mean, we are arts and culture, as Matthew Lee Earlbach likes to say, we are the First Amendment industry. We are the self-expression industry. So that doesn't have a party affiliation. So within that, when I talk about lawmakers in the past, that's not an invective against any particular political party. So I want to be clear on that. But when we talk about biases, which we've just talked about, there are some folks that when they think of the NEA, it's just immediately, there is a narrative about the NEA, about who it benefits, and about what it does, and very often about its efficacy or its necessity. When the truth of the matter is that most countries, first world countries, of which we would like to think we are among, they allocate a generous portion of federal money to the arts and culture sector. And that's not because we're a charity or a luxury. It's because we're an economic driver. And our rate of return is nearly double that of the national average. So when you're looking for a really sound investment that consistently, basically they've done a study. Richard Florida wrote this wonderful book. I'm completely blanking on the name. I believe it's called The Rise of the Creative Class. And it's essentially about this, about how one of the two leading factors to basically repairing a blighted neighborhood or an impoverished area, repairing it from the inside without gentrification, which is very important, is there are two factors. One is that there is an environment that is inclusive to the LGBTQI plus community. And then the second is that there is an arts and culture institution installed in that area. And when that happens, when those two things happen, that area, it's almost mathematical, it's almost scientific. It increases the economic boon of that area in multitudes, and it actually is exponential. So the more arts and culture institutions that are installed in an area, the higher the rate of return of that area.
Uh, to me, again, this is a no-brainer because the whole idea of humanity, the whole idea of productivity is, if we ask anybody that reach a certain level of productivity in their day, the answer is always the same: I really like what I do. So if people do not like what they do, they're not going to be as productive in it, they're not going to be as effective in it. So creativity and ability to do what you love, which encompasses our industry and the industry that literally does things because they love it. We're dealing with enormous amount of rejection, dealing with huge amount of self-sacrifice, and this is a really, really difficult industry to be in. We do this because we're creatives. So the productivity and the inclusivity and the acceptance, all of these are inherently a part of who we are and what we're about, and that in general translates to the basic mathematical and business principles, that if you love what you do and if you're excited about your life, if you care about people, everything is going to grow. And
Sure.
it's a no-brainer. I don't, and I think some of the biases that you may be encountering is that you are a charity, and we have this National Endowment for the Arts, and we have money always allocated to the arts, and all they do is just uh, put out movies that are saying bad things about politics. That's not the point. The point is, and you're doing the right thing by educating and saying, no, we are a huge industry. This is a driving business force. So you took it, in my opinion, you took it to the proper way of dealing with it. It's same thing with I created a health and wellness platform now, and I showed that it has 92% success rate in based on the two groups that I went through it, with stress reduction, 86% in getting better shape, whatever. But it took me going to corporate and showing them the specifics of it and how it's going to improve their sales force, and their ability for people to actually be on the payroll working, being more productive as opposed to being at home sick. It took the money in order for them to understand that, oh, this is important. Otherwise, it was just a fad. It was whatever, do this. Yeah, who cares? Oh, it's something that affects my bottom line. Okay,
Yes.
you're doing the same thing, and God bless you for it.
Exactly so. So like the truth of the matter is that we've been part of the reason why we believe a lot of arts and culture advocacy hasn't been as successful. And again, all of the credit in the world to all of the other folks fighting the good fight alongside us. Is partially because we're very used to the narrative of arts and culture is good because it feeds our soul. It's the social good that's the reason why it's important. And I believe that. I do believe that, and that is that continues to be true. We see the social impacts of the arts and culture sector, and how much it affects our population in terms of equality, justice, empathy, all of the ways with which it helps our society, right? It's one of the oldest, it remains to be true that everything we know about ourselves as a species, we know through arts and culture. If we go back to to the dawn of humankind, everything we know about past civilizations, we know through their architecture, their art, their pottery, everything we know about them, their literature, all of that is art. Everything we know about ourselves, about our humanity is through the arts. That goes for past and future, because when you think about what the space beacon that we sent out, out into the universe,
Yep.
what did we project to other civilizations?
Mm.
We sent them our art, our very expression of who we are. So we make that argument and have made that argument because it's correct, right? It's just intrinsically true. But that doesn't get laws passed, and it doesn't speak senator. So the good news is that we can use the dollars and cents argument quite well because we have the data to back it up. So, but one of the wonderful things about this work is that we can make the argument that it's both good for society and good for the bottom line. And both are true. We don't have to manipulate a single bit of data. It's all there. Like, it is one of the most easy arguments you can make. Like, it's, for lack of a better word, a no-brainer.
Yeah. And especially now, having not gone through COVID, we're still very much in depth of it. But as we as a society are starting to eventually come out of it, and we need to rebuild our economy, this is another driving force that should be a part of it, and that can be a part of it. I mean, we talked about Broadway being shut down. I mean, how many people just in Broadway are out of a job or are not participating in the economy? It's huge numbers. And it has nothing not even touching the travel aspect of people coming to see it. It's just people in New York. So it is a huge economical driver, and it needs to be addressed.
Well, 68% of tourism is cultural.
Right. Yeah.
68%. And that isn't just for New York City, that's for the entire nation. So when you think about Florida, when you think about Texas, South by Southwest, when you think about Sundance Film Festival in Utah, when you think about Bonnaroo, and when you think about Coachella, these are tourist events. And they are enormous economic drivers in their areas. And they affect the entire economy of that entire location, that town, that city, or that county, really. And those arts and culture events are something that area relies on for their economic model. So, when we talk about certain, I'm always forgetting the name of this theater. There's a theater that we reference quite often. It is 5,000 seats, right? And there is an outdoor theater, and and their summer season is something that entire area relies on, because 5,000 people pile into that theater every single night during the summer. And before pre-COVID, the owner of that theater would walk down Main Street, and the restaurant owners would come out of the restaurant, shake his hand. And, and their entire business model of these restaurants in this area were based off of the existence of this theater, right? Their entire business relied on it. And when that theater shut down for COVID, 3 restaurants immediately closed permanently. I don't know and that was months ago. So I can only imagine it's gotten worse. So when we talk about, Matthew Lee Earlbach describes arts and culture institutions as stars. And I think that's a really wonderful metaphor. And just like the sun is our star, right? It nurtures and makes possible all of the life in the solar system, right? But when a star implodes, it creates a black hole. And so what we're watching is, without federal relief to our sector, which has been, again, disproportionately affected. So this is the part that sometimes people have to have illustrated, which is the arts and culture sector is one of the first to close and will be one of the last to reopen, because most of the business models of arts and culture sector institutions require large amounts of people to gather in one place, in an enclosed area, shoulder to shoulder, and it requires the workers to many of them to be dancing next to each other, holding each other, kissing each other, having fake love scenes, singing in each other's faces. None of those things are great for an aerosol spreading pandemic disease. So that's why our sector there was no way to plan for this crisis. And even the best business models wouldn't have been able to prepare for this. We do need federal help in the same way that other areas of our economy. I'm thinking specifically of transportation that's been horribly affected. I'm thinking of hospitality, hotels and restaurants, bars. Those are all have the same similar business model, and all of those have been made legislative priorities. So we're simply asking to be made a legislative priority on par with some of the other industries who have received relief in our economy.
As you should. I mean, the aviation industry is being helped, but guess where they're flying to, and guess why they're flying there? It's not just business. It's visiting. It's tourism. It's silly. U.S. Open. I'm a huge tennis fan. U.S. Open is 2 weeks out of the year. There is an enormous facility in, I believe, Queens, that houses the National Tennis Center. It's huge. It's very expensive, but guess what? In those 2 weeks, it brings more money than I'm pretty sure that brings more money than baseball throughout its season and some of the other industries in just 2 weeks, because it's about people coming in to watch the people play. The same thing happens in Broadway. The same thing happens everywhere around the country. It's a huge economic driver. All right, we've kind of covered that part. I want to know more about you as an artist, because you are so busy doing this right now, and because of our industry in essence being shut down, some things are starting to or started to open up. Now they may get closed down again. Do you miss not acting? Because I know you're an actress, I know you're a director, I know you're a producer. So you're doing this, which is enormously important, but do you miss the other part of you?
Yes. Yes, I do. This is all I've ever known. It's one of the, my earliest memories of art, and it has been the only thing in my life since I was a child that, some people, I know that, that in some ways I'm privileged that some people spend a long time struggling to find out what they're supposed to do with their lives, right? Or what their leading passion is in their lives. And it's never been a mystery to me. It's never been something that I've struggled with in that way. The only part of the struggle is that I love almost every single sector of art. I am deeply, passionately in love with almost every single discipline in art of arts and culture. I'm devoted to visual art, singing, to theater and film. I'm not a great dancer, but that doesn't mean I'm, at least a choreographed dancer, but that doesn't mean I don't love it. And I love being around dancers. Oh, the way that they treat their bodies as a discipline is just fascinating to me. I did some work volunteering for Steps on Broadway, just so I could be around that environment and learn from it, and trade in the volunteer work for classes. Again, terrible dancer, so it wasn't to be an excellent ballet dancer. It was just heady to be with people who were practicing their work daily, hourly, and that kind of devotion to your craft is intoxicating and fascinating to me. So yeah, I don't know. I've been I'm a writer, director, producer, actress, and a visual artist as well. And it's one of those things where I miss all of it, but I'm also enormously fulfilled with what I'm doing now. Um, I'm I keep on trying to envision a future in which I'm able to do both because I feel that this work is so important, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to um, grow as a person and live up to the responsibilities that have kind of been surprisingly put on my shoulders. I want to be worthy of the work, so it does necessitate me putting my work, what has defined me for my entire life, to the side a bit. Um, I've written a little bit, but there's no real acting work going on right now, so that I'm not worried about. But some of the other stuff that I would normally be doing, I was badly injured. I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but
Yeah, yeah. What happened?
um, so I was carrying glasses, and someone ran into me, and the glasses sort of shattered like a tambourine and slit my wrist, and severed my medial nerve. I don't have any feeling in part of my hand, my thumb,
Wow.
and I can't really move it past this. I had nerve graft surgery from my transferring a nerve from my leg into my dominant hand to but that meant that I was basically down an arm and a leg for a series of months. So you can't really get acting work if you have just a gaping wound and a non-working right dominant hand and a boot on your leg. I mean, I'm sure that there was some gig that I missed that was looking for someone with only one working hand and leg, but otherwise, you pivot. I use that time to help co-produce a podcast version of The Blondes, which is this wonderful novel written by Emily Schultz. She's so we did a version of that. I was able to help cast a series that eventually went to Tribeca Film Festival, and I wrote a play that was a finalist for the O'Neill and the Jane Chambers Excellence in Feminist Writing. Like I was able to do things during that time that didn't that wasn't acting, and that's what I probably honestly would be doing now if I wasn't doing this, is finding a way to still express myself and still participate in the arts as an artist. But this is important work too, and while I miss, boy do I miss the creative process. If I think about it too much, I'll start to cry.
I get you. Are you becoming ambidextrous since that time?
No, I can use my right hand. I did have to sort of relearn how to write, however, because my functionality in my right hand isn't great, nor is the feeling great. But I'm not great with my left hand.
I recall, and this is something that helped me. Not that I'm trying to give you life lessons, but I recall in one of my computer jobs, I was working with a director, and he would write kind of with his non-dominant hand, and I asked him about it. He said, "Yeah, I'm doing it purposefully because it develops your brain, it develops other functions," and he would kind of do things with both hands. And since that time, I started kind of playing with it. I'm right hand dominant. So what I started doing is when my son and I would throw a ball, I would throw with my left and my right. When we would play ping pong, I would play with my right and my left.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I have become ambidextrous, but it became it became more of who I am. So I'm not sure how it rewired my brain and if more more parts are being utilized. But when I broke my left wrist, recently, I think 3 years ago, it's even though I'm right hand dominant, kind of because I was used to doing things with both hands, it was an easier process. So I don't know if this is something that you want to kind of investigate, because you realize all of a sudden, and I'm sure you've had that too, like all of a sudden you don't have a normal way of doing things, and you can figure it out, right?
Oh yeah.
I keep I keep my phone in my right hand, pen pocket, right? If I can't do it, no, how do I do it? But you figure it out. You figure it out because you realize that, oh, things bend in a way that I didn't really use before.
Hmm.
So it was weird, but it gets stuff done. And I remember looking at the videos of people who were born, without arms, and then are only using their, legs for painting, for, working, for clothing their child, for playing the piano. And initially, kind of when I was watching those, I was just blown away by it. But when I, lost function for a period of time in my wrist, it goes back to, okay, I can figure things out, and it became more of that exercise. So, you know, it's life happens. It's just
Oh
what we choose to do when it does.
yeah, I mean, to be clear, I mean, I used my
Yeah.
left hand a lot, and especially, when I was younger, there was a lot of me. I was really fascinated with the idea of being ambidextrous, so I practiced a lot with my left hand writing. And also as an artist, as a visual artist, one of the common practices is to basically trade hands and sketch and paint with your non-dominant hand um, to explore the difference, like how your brain works. Because of course, there's this wonderful book. It's called Drawing from the Right Side of Your Brain. If you've ever read it, it's it was both of my parents are left-handed, which is interesting because they raised two right-handers. So I grew up in a house with nothing but left-handed scissors. Like I grew up in a very left-dominated household. So I was very used to it as a child of exploring my left-handedness, and also as a martial artist. I've studied for a number of years. Something else that COVID has taken away and my injury before that. Yes, I was MMA, Muay Thai, and Jiu Jitsu, boxing are sort of my disciplines that I've been cultivating for. I think it's probably 7, 8 years now.
Mhm.
And that's something that requires very much
Yeah,
ambidexterity. There it is.
we'll go with it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Um, and a part of, as I said before, not a great dancer, but part of my devotion to,
Mhm.
initially it was MMA, and then later, I wanted to hone in on the breakdown of, because mixed martial arts is mixed, so I wanted to understand what the pure forms of that martial art was.
Yeah,
I
tradition.
wanted to explore boxing in its purity and Muay Thai in its purity. Purity is probably the wrong word, but you understand what I mean.
Tradition.
um, but both of them, like, i've never I've never really quite been great at choreographed dance, and part of the way I was wanting to explore why that is through martial arts, because it does access the same parts of your brain, about learning choreographed steps, but instead of them being dance moves, they're fighting moves. And it wasn't something I was initially good at, and then I got pretty good, and it became a huge part of my life for a long time. I miss it very much. But with that, you absolutely have to use both hands.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just not great with writing with my left hand. I've practiced for a long time. I can type just fine. Everything else, and I use both hands pretty well. It's just the physical writing that it's frustrating. I like to move faster than that.
I understand that. So back to the martial arts, because I'm an avid martial art fan. I've been in martial arts my whole life. There again, to put it bluntly, there are fighters and there are people who love it. I'm people who love it, as opposed to the fighter variety.
An
But
aficionado.
huh?
An aficionado.
Aficionado, yes, is somebody who's appreciative of the actual art form. That's me. I have my black belt, so I got to my point of having my name in gold on my black belt, which is I love that. But I consider it more of an honorary title rather than a fighting ability. Uh,
What was your discipline?
he was mixed as well. I trained. The first discipline that I had was judo when I was a kid, and I loved judo, but I didn't do it for that long. Then I did karate. Then when I came to the United States, did I did mix. So mix was more of it was a wonderful Russian practitioner who trained the special forces. So he had his own kind of mix of Russian sambo with traditional Chinese techniques with a little bit of Jeet Kune Do. So it was kind of this mix. So he and the World WUCA, World something something arts association. I'm looking at my certificate. They came out and they were testing. So he made me test for. I'm like, I'm not ready. I shouldn't be testing. He made me test, and that's how I got my black belt. But it was a mix. But me personally, my heart, this is, I don't know, past life or me just growing up watching Bruce. It's more kind of kung fu and tai chi and softer flowing styles. It's not necessarily, I mean, Jeet Kune Do, yes, but tai chi is not for martial arts application. It's more of there's just something when I put the uniform on and when I start moving, it's just home. It's me. So for whatever reason, it's just that's me. So it was much more on the softer styles versus the harder styles. That's my thing. But big fan of Muay Thai. I tried I tried boxing once. I got punched in the face. I said, I'm not going to do it anymore.
You either love it or hate it.
Yeah.
See, for me, I love punching. I love it. I love the high contact. I love punching. I love kicking. I love all of that so much. And the interesting thing about getting punched in the face is that at a certain point, you start to take apart. Like you start to deconstruct what your response to being punched is. And so much of it is the anticipation of pain, and so much of it is the shock of actually being touched in a place where most people do not touch you.
Yeah.
And then the actual pain is just a small fraction of what it is. Most of it is the fear of pain, the shock that something has happened to you, and then just the tiniest percentage of it is actual real pain. So thinking through it is a very fascinating thing for me. But I mean, for me, it was a lot of, I'm open about this. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse. So for me, my interest in exploration of martial arts, and I think a lot of women that I knew when I was training and coming up in MMA, they were sort of cycling through their own trauma and their own ways of taking control over like a situation from the past where they didn't have control. And for me, certainly, getting punched in the face initially was like super triggering, and like there was a lot of panic attacks. There was a lot of hyperventilation that came with that. With jujitsu, which I love so much, having so much of that work be where somebody's on top of you trying to choke the life out of you.
Mhm.
A lot of processing of a lot of feelings, a lot of memories that, like came up. But I found it very therapeutic, in addition to therapy, actual therapy. I found it very therapeutic to really, in real time, learn how to not panic, learn what to do in a situation like that, but also learn that there are, that half of what you're fighting against is your own fear. So much of what it is your own fear. And if you can push past the fear and start to navigate in real time into problem solving mode, then you might not win. You might still be tapped out, but
Mhm.
you're not panicking through the decision making process.
Mhm.
You're instead pushing that, acknowledging that fear, because fear is your friend in some ways. There's a wonderful book called The Gift of Fear. It's in us for a reason. It's to keep us alive, right? But when it no longer serves us, when it basically short circuits all the rest of the parts of your brain that are going to also keep you alive, which is the
Mhm.
decision making, problem solving parts of your brain, then you say, thank you so much, fear. I'm going to put you right here,
Mhm.
right next to me. And now I'm going to sort of explore all the different ways that I can get out of the situation. And for me, martial arts is so much about um, almost the physical discipline is less than half of it. It's the mental discipline. It's what it teaches you about how to encounter difficulties, how to encounter fear, and navigate through it. How to your relationship to panic, your relationship to anxiety, your relationship to antagonism and conflict. Um, and I'm one of those. There isn't a zealot more. There isn't there's no zealot like a convert. I'm one of those people that's like, every single woman should take a self-defense class, not a self-defense class, specifically a martial arts. Like it should be taught to every single child, regardless of gender, really. But specifically women.
Yeah.
Women need to.
Yeah.
I think we have been taught to be really afraid physically of men, and I'm not saying that that's right or true. Like I'm not saying that even with self-defense under your belt, that you should engage in a physical conflict with someone who's bigger than you, regardless of gender, again. But I know when I first started to really integrate
Mhm.
the art in the martial arts into my brain, it was like a weight had lifted off of my back, and I didn't realize how much of my life I lived in fear, just from walking from place to place, or walking home after dark. So many. I didn't realize how much fear I carried inside of my body until it started to release. And I just feel like everyone that deserves that release.
100%. I have a 16-year-old daughter, so she did a number of years of taekwondo, but no offense to taekwondo. Taekwondo is not great in real life application in a street fight, unless you're a high level practitioner. So she took taekwondo. I'm still having her go and continue and take self-defense classes and do that, because there needs to be that level of confidence. I remember myself growing up, very little confidence. I was a nerdy kid. I loved acting, and I was writing poetry. So you can imagine the fun that I was having.
We would have been friends.
Yes, yes. And again, this is our industry, right? It's
Mhm.
our pool of people who are creative, who are accepting, who are true to who they really are as human beings. So going and taking martial arts was a huge thing, but it's a wave. And I found that when I'm in that wave, when I'm taking martial arts, when I'm training, the confidence level is very different from, I haven't trained for a while. I stopped training because I almost had my eye poked out. Uh, I don't think I have the little scar anymore, but we were doing in that, uh, in that coaches, we had full gear on. We were practicing, kind of knife techniques and sparring. And we were just doing free sparring. We put everything on, but I did not put the goggles on. So everything on, and it was a hard rubber knife as opposed to the a little flimsy flexible one. And he went. I blocked something, but I mostly didn't see what was happening. And then I realized that I may have just lost my left eye.
Oh God.
And I very kind of gingerly opened my eye. Okay, good. It's still there. And then, like, I don't know, a centimeter or a few millimeters below the eye is where there was a cut. So just a little more. And then I was at that time, what, 37, 38. I said, do I really need this? And the answer was no, because I am not a fighter. I was never interested in fighting or hurting someone. It was more of I love the art and I love practicing it. I don't really care about sparring because to me, sparring is an interesting element on its own. When I'm sparring, I know what I would be doing if I was actually in a fight, but I have to hold, I touch. And then it always frustrates me when I was sparring and people were going hard. I'm like, dude, I can go harder too, but then I break your leg and that's not the point. So
No,
like,
it's not. You can't spar with anybody who doesn't know how to
right,
like, you should be able to bring it to a 4.
right,
That's you spar to spar tomorrow. That's the that's the rule. You spar to spar another day. And
right,
if you're, like, it's just like watching those kittens or puppies and the ones that don't know how to put in their claws.
yep,
Like, it's like, we're play fighting. You do know that there's a difference. We're play fighting. Put your claws back in, like, because this is, like, we're pretending to hurt each other. We're practicing for a
yep,
real life event. I'm not, like, I'm not out to hurt you, and you should not be out to hurt me.
yeah.
We should be practicing for the real enemies of the world, not making enemies out of each other. That always drove me crazy when somebody went too hard.
Yeah, it's like, it's, yeah, it's a dance, right? It's that the respect factor of, I know that if you're going, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I see the distance, and I know that I can get there, and I am kind of touching, and I'm doing that, and at the same time I'm getting hit back. I'm like, okay, if I did what I did, you wouldn't be standing anymore. So the point of the rest of it is just for us to learn and to kind of play. So like the sparring, I never found useful because you either go or you don't. And I never wanted to go because as a person, I never want to hurt anybody. I want to get them away. And God forbid if I'm ever in a situation, which thankfully I have not been, where it's one of those things where I have to use what I know because
Mhm.
I don't know if I would be able to use what I know. But I basically said after after almost losing an eye, I said thank you. And I went and then I just started practicing Tai Chi, which I need to get back into, and that gives me my fill of I'm still connected, I'm still doing this, but it's a very different exploration. So I basically just watch a lot of martial arts films and talk to martial artists. I had some on my program, and the rest is just appreciation.
I tell you, I do like to mix it up. I'll be honest. I do like to mix it
Seems
up.
like yep,
Yeah, I don't mind the fighting part. I think part of that for me was just, because I've spent so much of my life, you know, it's strange because I do consider myself for the most part a pacifist. For the most part, I mean, I guess that's not true. You can't be partly a pacifist. For definitely for a part of my life, I considered myself a pacifist, and I think that, my relationship to the world has changed, and therefore my relationship to conflict has changed. I think that there are some things worth fighting for, and some things that, unfortunately, we don't live in a world where you can eschew violence. I wish that that were true, but you have to be able to basically put your money where your mouth is with the bullies of the world, and you have to be capable of defending yourself with those who would wish to, oppress you through violence.
yeah,
So for me, you know, again, in a woman's body. And I don't think that domestic violence is inherently just a female experience. That's one. I don't think it's a gendered experience. We know that domestic violence happens across genders, but it does overwhelmingly happen to women. Same thing with sexual violence. And so I think again, it is not gendered. It happens to everyone, but women are, or people, those who identify as women, you know, and the trans community, I would say as well, is disproportionately hit by violence, both sexual and domestic violence. And so, you know, living in a certain body informs your relationship to violence. And, you know, I think for me, I had to reconcile what I think is my intrinsically peaceful, gentle heart with the fact that I couldn't survive in the world with, you know, like that approach led to me being beaten multiple times. So, you know, like there had to be a different approach to how I encountered people who meant me harm. So it's evolved. It's complicated for me, but generally speaking, I've had to teach myself more mettle and more just. I've had to teach myself to not be stronger, because I don't think that that's the same thing as that. But I've had to teach myself to be capable of violence, which is not something that I think is naturally in me. But having taught it to myself, I understand its value, and it makes me more fearless in the face of bullies and adversaries, and it makes me more capable of engaging in conflict, nonviolent conflict, just conflict in general, with a lot more clear-eyed focus. So for that, I'm really grateful. You know, it's a complicated relationship, humanity's relationship to violence. I don't have all the answers.
But I think you have a good approach to it, and look where, if we're looking at, you know, the arc so far of your life, you know, look what you're doing right now. It's picking the right fight. So your ability and your perception and your belief in yourself is now allowing you to be in a situation where you can be fighting for others' rights and fighting for the industry that we love. And I don't think that that's a stretch. I think one has to do with the other.
Yes, I do too. And I will say that it's always been easier for me to fight for other people than for myself. That's always been true. There's something about, you know, coming to someone else's defense that just, morally speaking, has instilled in me, you know, like a lot of my hesitation is about the morality of any kind of engagement. You know, any kind of engagement in conflict is always about, well, what is the right thing to do? Is there a different approach I could have that would have a more favorable outcome? But when it comes to just any situation where I see someone being victimized in any way or oppressed in any way, like it's just clearer. It's just clearer when it's someone else. You know, I'm teaching myself to be a defender of myself as passionately as I'm a defender of other people. But it's a hard lesson.
Yeah, it is. Well, Jenny, this has been a joy to talk to you. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing and opening up. I know some of these things are not easy to talk about. I'm glad you're in the fight for our industry, and I'm really, really happy that you joined me.
Me too. This was such a pleasure. What a nice, delightful time experience, and a nice little break in my day. You know, it's just nice to have I'm glad we talked about fighting. I mean, I love talking about my art, but you know, it feels like all I do all day, every day is talk about be an arts hero and the work. And of course, it's all consuming and I love it. But you know, I like talking about martial arts sometimes. No, what a delight! That was such a nice little break in my day.
Thank you. Well, you're always welcome back on. If you want to talk martial arts or anything else, please let me know. And
Yeah, let's talk some more about boxing and punching. Let's just
I think as a part of the, you know what, let's end because I wanted to ask something else. So everybody, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode of The Love of Acting, where we never know where these conversations are going to go. The only thing that we know for certain is the people that we talk to really love what they do. And that's why we continue doing this. Thank you.